We begin my top 36 remaining running back rankings. Remember, running backs on the Chargers or Broncos, because they played on Thursday night, are not included in these rankings. We begin with running backs that I think are probably low end running back threes to potentially high end RB3s. We have Abdullah, Algier, Bigsby, Warren, Spears, Etienne, Madison, Tracy, Swift, Ford, and White. Amir Abdullah in 3 of the past 5 weeks has scored a receiving touchdown. I don't think that happens this week against Jacksonville, but I do think he gets a couple grabs. Tyler Algier is playing against the Giants. All right, so with Michael Penix starting, I think that's going to improve the offense's efficiency. I think they are obviously a much better team than the Giants. I think they're going to build an early lead and look to run the ball to salt the game, especially in the second half. And so I think that Algier is going to get some volume, but I don't think he scores a touchdown. Tank Bigsby is playing against the Las Vegas Raiders this week. So it's a great matchup, first of all, on paper, but then the game script should also be in his favor. I don't think he ends up scoring a rushing touchdown, but I think he has a pretty good day on the ground. Jalen Warren was a little bit disappointing this past week, but the last time in which he played Baltimore, he did have over 10 full PPR points. I don't think he's going to have quite as good of a day, but I do think he's going to get it done through the air. Tajay Spears went from basically a nothing burger to having a massive game this past week, especially through the air. I don't think he's going to have a ridiculous game, but I do think he gets a couple grabs, and I think he's going to be efficient on the ground. Travis Etienne has seen at least 4 receptions in each of the past 2 weeks. He's starting to reclaim his role as more of the lead back in a committee. This against the Raiders is absolutely a matchup that he can exploit. I think he's going to be pretty efficient, but I don't think he ends up scoring a touchdown. Alexander Mattison has been pretty disappointing, but he should get some volume in this game. Jacksonville does allow the third most points to running backs. I still don't think he's going to have a massive day overall, but I do think he ends up salvaging his fantasy day with a rushing touchdown. Tyron Tracy, after 2 weeks of at least 14.5 full PPR points, came back down to earth. I think he's going to have a better day this week, but I don't think he scores a touchdown. I don't think he sees a tremendous amount of volume on the ground either. DeAndre Swift is the king of 9-point games. He's had 9 full PPR points in 3 of the past 4, including the last matchup in which he played Detroit. I think that happens again. I don't think he scores a touchdown, but I think he's a safe running back 3 from a floor perspective due to volume. Jerome Ford was hyper efficient on the ground and through the air this past week against Kansas City, and he did score a touchdown. I don't think that happens again, but I do think he sees quite a bit of receiving work, but I don't think he scores a touchdown. Rashad White is playing against Dallas this week. He scored touchdowns in 3 of the past 4 weeks. I don't think that happens this week, but I do think he's a safe floor option because he should get some receptions in the passing game. And now we have running backs that I think are low-end RB2s to potentially high-end RB2s. We have Harris, Pacheco, Miller, Taylor, Brian Robinson Jr., Stevenson, Pollard, Dowdle, Walker, Hubbard, and Hall. Najee Harris has definitely been declining the past couple of weeks. He was really disappointing for us this past week, but he did have over 10 full PPR points against Baltimore the past time in which they played. I think due to sheer volume and receiving work that he's going to be a safe floor option, but in what's a really tough matchup against Baltimore, I don't think he has a ceiling game. Isaiah Pacheco is playing against the Houston Texans this week. They do allow the 4th fewest points to fantasy running backs. I do think he's going to be reasonably efficient despite the tough matchup, but I don't think he ends up scoring a touchdown. Now we have Kendre Miller in the likely absence of Alvin Kamara. I think he's going to be a solid low-end RB2 for us. I think he's going to be pretty efficient on the ground and through the air, but I don't think he scores a touchdown. Now we have Patrick Taylor against Miami. This is what it's come to for the San Francisco 49ers. Think about the injury history of that team for years now. Just about everybody on the team has missed time at this point. Their strength and conditioning coaches probably need to be investigated. I don't think he's going to be incredibly efficient, but I think he sees a decent amount of volume in this game, and I think he does end up scoring a rushing touchdown. Brian Robinson Jr. did have 63 rushing yards and a touchdown the last time in which he played against Philadelphia. They do allow the 3rd fewest points to fantasy running backs, so it is a tough matchup, but I think he gets it done with a rushing touchdown again, salvaging his fantasy day. Ramondre Stevenson finds himself matched up against the Buffalo Bills. They do allow the 2nd most points to fantasy running backs. I think he's going to be efficient on the ground, although I think due to game script, he's not going to see as much volume there, but I do think he gets some receiving work. Tony Pollard was disappointing this past week with only 8.5 full PPR points, but he did have over 17 full PPR points the last time in which he played against Indianapolis. This is a matchup that they can exploit, and with them starting Mason Rudolph, I do think that improves the efficiency of the offense, leading to him having a decently efficient day, but I don't think he scores. Okay, Rico Dowdle. After failing to post a 100-yard rusher for the entirety of the season, he's had over 100 rushing yards in each of the past three. I don't think due to game script that's going to be happening here against Tampa Bay, and they do allow the 13th fewest points to fantasy running backs. I do think he's going to be used in the passing game, but I don't think he scores a touchdown. Kenneth Walker has been pretty disappointing for us in fantasy. Now he finds himself matched up against Minnesota, who allow the second fewest points to fantasy running backs. I think he's going to have a thoroughly inefficient day, but I think he gets receiving work, and I do think he ends up scoring a rushing touchdown. Chuba Hubbard, when the game script isn't working completely against him, gets a ton of volume in this Carolina offense. I think they're going to be able to keep it reasonably close enough with Arizona to allow him to have enough volume to be a decent fantasy play this week, and I do think he ends up scoring a rushing touchdown. Breece Hall only played 48% of the snaps this past week in his return from a knee injury. I think he sees a little bit more involvement this week, and I think he has another rushing touchdown, but I don't think he's going to see a ridiculous amount of usage as they look to conserve him for this next season. If you like what you're hearing and seeing so far, feel free to like and subscribe, and make sure you check out my other positional rankings being wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks. Thanks. And now we have running backs that I think are high-end RB2s to low-end RB1s. We have JT, Irving, Cook, Jones, Henry, and Mixon. Jonathan Taylor, if you were able to get past him just choosing to drop the ball at the 1 yard line and fail to score a touchdown, good for you. He would have had about 16 full PPR points. If you're still alive, I think he's a decent option as a high-end RB2. He has a plus matchup here against Tennessee, and it's absolutely one that he should be able to exploit. Bucky Irving has been absolutely incredible recently. I think here against Dallas, he's going to be really efficient. I don't think he ends up scoring a touchdown, but I think he sees quite a bit of involvement in the passing game. James Cook tore up Detroit this past week. Here against New England, it's an advantageous matchup. I think he's going to be pretty efficient, and I do think he scores a rushing touchdown. Aaron Jones has scored a touchdown in each of the past 4 weeks. I see no reason for that to discontinue here against Seattle. It's a middle-of-the-road matchup, but the offense is so efficient, and they're going to score quite a few points, and I do think he extends his touchdown streak to 5 games. Derrick Henry has slowed down in each of the past 3 weeks, but the last time he played against Pittsburgh, he did have over 60 rushing yards and a touchdown. I think he's going to see a little bit more success on the ground and score another rushing touchdown en route to a top 10 fantasy finish. For most of the season, Joe Mixon has been fantastic for us. He's seen some rough stretches of play in the past couple of weeks. I do think he's going to have a decent performance here against Kansas City. I do think he has over 100 total scrimmage yards and does score a rushing touchdown. And now we have running backs that I think are mid to elite RB1s with a realistic shot at being the RB1. We have Achane, Williams, Connor, Brown, Barkley, Jacobs, Robinson, and Gibbs. Devon Achane has finished no worse than the RB14 in every week since week 11. I see no reason for that to discontinue. Here in San Francisco, it's absolutely a matchup that he can exploit, and I think he gets a receiving touchdown. Kyron Williams has seen 29 carries in each of the past 2 games. Here against the Jets, while they do allow the 7 fewest points to fantasy running backs, I think he sees a ton of volume, and I think he gets a rushing touchdown in this game. James Conner continues to defy everything that he's shown us in his career in terms of his health. Up to this point, he hasn't missed any time. This is the furthest in which he has ever made it in terms of consecutive games played in a season. Of course, he would do that at age 29, right? But hey, good for him. And he is playing against the Panthers, who allow the most fantasy points to running backs per game. I think he's going to eat in this game, and I think he does score a rushing touchdown. Chase Brown, since week 9, has had no fewer than 19 full PPR points when he's played. Here against the Browns, it is a tough matchup. They allow the 5th fewest points to fantasy running backs, but I see no reason for his production to slip, and I do think he has another rushing touchdown. And now we have Saquon Barkley against Washington. While in each of the past 3 weeks, he's been a little bit disappointing for us fantasy managers. The last time he played against Washington, he had over 30 full PPR points. I don't think he does that again, but I think he returns to being an elite running back 1. Josh Jacobs has finished no worse than the running back 6 in every week since week 11. He has scored a ridiculous amount of touchdowns in this time span, including multiple 3+ touchdown games. Here against New Orleans, it's a plus matchup. I think he's going to absolutely dominate, and I think he has multiple rushing touchdowns. Bijan Robinson, despite not scoring a touchdown, did have 125 rushing yards. I think with Michael Penix at the helm, this helps everyone out in terms of all of the skill position players. I think he's going to be really efficient, and I do think he has a touchdown. And finally, we have Jahmyr Gibbs. Last year, when Montgomery was out, he had 27 and 29 fantasy points. He finds himself playing in Chicago, who will allow some of the most fantasy points to running backs. I think he's going to get a ton of work, and I think he's going to score multiple touchdowns. And so to conclude, running backs that I think are low-end RB3s to high-end RB3s, we have Abdullah, Algier, Bigsby, Warren, Spears, Etienne, Madison, Tracy, Swift, Ford, and White. Running backs that I think are low-end RB2s to high-end RB3s to potentially high-end RB2s, we have Harris, Pacheco, Miller, Taylor, Brian Robinson Jr., Stevenson, Pollard, Dowdle, Walker, Hubbard, and Hall. Running backs that I think are high-end RB2s to potentially low-end RB1s, we have Taylor, Irving, Cook, Jones, Henry, and Mixon. And then running backs that I think are mid to elite RB1s with a realistic shot at being the RB1 this week, we have Achane, Williams, Connor, Brown, Barkley, Jacobs, Robinson, and Gibbs. All right, you know the drill. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Is there somebody that I'm not projecting for enough points? If so, let me know below in the comment section and let me know why. Remember that players who played on Thursday night, such as any Chargers or Broncos players, are not included in these rankings. And make sure you check out my other positional rankings being wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks. Thanks.